Well, looks like we're live. Who all do we have in here? Looks like Barrows swung by and he was in and out. Same thing with Roland. Dakota's saying that automotive performance is the best thing to learn. I would agree with that. David James. When I see that, I think of David James Homes, the home builder. Pure Pontiac Garage. Ari's in here. Buff's working on a transmission. He'll be listening in. Big Belly Racing, Heavens Mopar, Scarlet the Four-Eyed Cuda. Be great if Cope can make it. Yeah, I agree. He's got the link. He may be buying a little bit. Just Mopar Joe in the house. Colleen is here. Dart Sport. Let's see here. Two Hacks. Jeff's here. Unfinished Project is saying Ram 5440. Sounds good to me. Make it happen, man. I'd like to see it. Mike Ivan, the torque converter whisperer, is here. Uh-oh. Someone's ringing the doorbell. And it's Mr. Cope.
What's up, John?
What's happening, my man? I'm just going through greeting everybody. We got Jay from Rabbit Transit Garage, Drag Pack Merc, Daddy's Money Garage. This is where I learned to spend $18,000 on a Malaysia Mopar. Yeah, I'd make a good follow-up to that one, but I'll refrain. Let's see. Unfinished Project says potato. Well, we know the party can start now. Glad you could join. I just had I don't know. I was just kind of thinking what to do tonight. I've laid off the guests a little bit. Just for a little while. We're going to be doing a live from PRI and bothering people more regularly, and certainly as we ramp up next year. But I was thinking of doing some different stuff. So I said one of these days, maybe when it slows down a little bit, I'll get out some of my stuff from, taking automotive classes in college. Because there is some interesting stuff here that's I don't know, some of it may be boring, some of it may be kind of fun. The stories are certainly fun. But I thought that since you used to moonlight as a transmission teacher, that you might have some good input from the other side.
A little bit. I actually, when I took that, the college didn't want to hire me because I didn't have any formal education other than a high school diploma.
Oh yeah, the higher ups are like that.
I told him, I says, listen, I says I'll do it for free, and if you think I'm doing a good job, then you can pay me for it. So it worked out. I did it for 3 years, and I originally did it to have some extra money for racing. But it was really neat because I run into those kids once in a while that are grown men now, and it's weird when they call me Mr. Cope.
Right.
Are we? Is there someone else in here, John, or is it just me and you?
It's you and I, and we're live. Oh, okay. We're already running live. Yeah.
Yeah, that I know. But it really was a great experience, and 99.9% of the kids were there because they really wanted to learn. And so we stayed afterwards a lot, and I even had some there was a real big transmission warehouse where they sold parts and reman parts and stuff like that. And I even took it upon myself to have like a field trip there that was unsanctioned from the school because of course, liabilities.
Right.
So I just told the kids, listen, I'm going to be at this place. It was called Trans Parts of Indiana. And we're going to be here at noon. It'll be a 2-hour gig. And you can see someone who's in the business. You can learn about the business. So I wanted to show them more than just the nuts and bolts of, how to take a transmission apart, since I was in the business. And there's actually a guy, one of the students who works in the shop just down the street from me, and I see him all the time.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So they didn't want they had to be unsanctioned. They wouldn't let you make a formal field trip out of it.
No, no. It was really weird how they did that. There was a bunch of paperwork and all this other stuff. And I think at that time I was 29 years old. So I was like, well, forget you. I'll just go ahead and do it on my own.
You know what though? If you were 29, that would have been, if my math's right, that'd have been the year I started college. So if I'd
Well,
started college there instead of here, I might have had you for a teacher.
now you're making me feel old. Let me see if I can remember. I got married in 90. So this was in 92, 3, and 4. I was born in 65. You do the math. You tell me how old I was.
You've been 27 and 92.
Okay.
Yeah.
Close to it. I'm
Close.
doing this on my phone,
Yeah,
and
it's good.
I can't get this thing right, and I can't see because I have to look through my bifocals to see you. So I look like a dork. Maybe I should get on my laptop.
Well, it's whatever you want to do. I mean, it's fine, or you can switch your lap, whatever you want to do. The big thing is you already know you're in frame. So if you want to switch over to comments, you can switch over, or I can just pop stuff up on the screen when we have questions. But
However you want to do it, John. And thanks for having me again.
yeah, I just thought this would be fun, and I always like having you on. It's a blast. The time flies by. I always enjoy it.
I
But I
tell
would
you what, if you could um entertain your guests for about 2 or 3 minutes,
sure.
I'm gonna switch from my phone to my computer, okay?
Sounds good. We'll let you back
All
in.
right. Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
sounds
Be back. Be right back.
yep.
All right. How do I get out of here?
All right, that works. He'll be back. Well, this is always fun. Buff's covered in automatic transmission fluid. That's the spirit. So there you go. So Coke comes by and gives you like a trailer, before. But I don't know. I thought this was different. I've been saying I wanted to do this, and I just haven't done it. And I thought this would be good to do today. I've absolutely got to get back to scheduling my guests, and I am already working on that. And we are going to have a live from PRI on the 9th and some other stuff. But this is something fun to do while it's just a little bit slower. Peckerwood Customs is here. Dizzy Izzy slid in. Pure Pontiac Garage feels out of place in this Mopar house. Well, I don't know. We've got lots of other guys here too. We got guys like Buff, and sometimes Punisher Ray will stop by. Scott Speed Shop. Word has it he might be a Mopar guy. One-eyed cat. He is a Mopar guy. How's it going, Mr. Jed? Blank orange paper, yes. Not for much longer, though. Auto Salvage Outlaws is here. Yeah, I got a few cool things. We'll wait for Cope to show back up. No problem, Dean. It fluctuates. Have no idea what that means. Scott Speech Up says it's cold. Yes, it is. It's showing 35 on my screen. I don't know what it is. All I know is that when it's below the mid 50s, it just feels inhumane to me. Turbo Tom says they won't let us use rebuilt transmissions anymore at the dealership. Well, I'm not surprised. It's just going that way. They don't really build any components at the dealership anymore at all, do they? Just Mopar Joe's trying to get that red Coronet finished up and out of there, it looks like. Irish Outlaw says just throw them. Well, he likes to throw things. Yeah, 25, 15, no thanks. It's 35 here. That's plenty cold. And then Scarlett the Four-Eyed Cuda has to remind us how it's 59 in Central Florida. Well, yeah, but you got to live with the Florida people. So I like the temperature, but I don't envy all the YouTube highlights we get out of Florida.
Hey, there you are.
Yeah. Yep, I'm in the same place. There you are. You've moved a little bit.
Yeah, I can't see. I'm so blind. I got to look through my bifocals. and so the phone just wasn't working for me. So
Okay.
thanks
No,
for
that's
being
perfect.
patient.
Oh yeah, of
And how
course.
do John, can I ask you how I get the chat thingy up so I can take a
Sure.
gander at that?
So
I
go
think
over
on the
on the
bottom
right.
left.
Yeah, go over on the right hand side of your screen. You'll see. I think it's private and comments. You want to click comments, and why
I
it does.
see it now.
Yeah, I don't know why it defaults to the other because nobody uses that. Pure
Hmm.
Pontiac says I sound like I feel better today. Yes, I do. I do feel better, and I think I sound better. I don't not that I ever sound good, but Dust Devil Garage says it's 26 here, and I have to head to the shop after this. Yeah, but if you have heat in your shop, that's not the worst thing. James and James is here. All right, so while I was looking for some of these books, I was in the garage looking through some stuff. I found a bookmark that I had in one of them. This is a ticket to a spectator ticket to an NMCA event from 2002,
Oh, cool.
sponsored by Miller Racing, May 18th of 02. I don't even know what event that would be. It was something NMCA, NSCA. I have to look that up and see what it was. And I found an old parking pass from New River.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, so I was at Virginia Tech. I was at Bluefield College, then Virginia Tech, and then after that, I was at New River. So this was my last parking permit right here.
Did you go through the whole gig there, John?
Yeah, I did. I kind of did it backwards though. I went. I got a bachelor's degree at Virginia Tech, the long way, and then
Hmm.
after that, I went to New River Community College. They did not make me do freshman orientation or any of that stuff though. They didn't make me do that, but I did
Hmm.
all of the automotive classes.
Oh, you went there for automotive.
I went to New River for that. Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. But now with Virginia Tech, though, I did take some engine and engineering classes there, and it's interesting. Like in the thumbnail for this, I just took a picture of some of the papers, laid them out. It's interesting the way they teach in like a 4-year university, or not 4-year, but if you 4-year program at a university, the way they teach engine performance, because a lot of their people who take it aren't car people at all. And they're taking it purely for a theoretical experience, right? So you have people in there that have absolutely no idea how to change engine oil, might not even know if cars use it. They know nothing about it. A lot of them don't have driver's licenses. It's a completely different crowd at Virginia Tech. Now, you do have some car guys in there too. Don't get me wrong. But you also have people in there who, let's say they've only ever ridden, well, at that time, the bus. This was before Uber, right? But you have people in there that know, I mean, absolutely nothing about cars, have never used hand tools. So some of the things they teach are really wild and different, like the test prep stuff. Um, the way they explain things has to be beyond elementary.
Hmm.
Uh, it's interesting, and the theory is interesting too. A lot of it is well. I remember this, and I found the sheet to prove it. One of the things that we had to do in one of my courses of tech, we had to make a tool gauge. You know what that is? It's this thing that you can use to measure angles and has a little scale for measuring lengths and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's a tool gauge.
Hmm.
And anyway, it looks like I got reasonably good marks on it. I got a 92 out of 100, which passed. But the one I thought was the funniest is attitude and work habits. I got a 7 out of 10. He docked me 3 points for one reason. The guy got mad because when I made my tool gauge, it's made out of aluminum. I polished it. I mean, I polished this thing like a polished aluminum valve cover, like a mag wheel, and then
Uh-huh.
I wrapped it with blue painter's tape to keep it from getting scratched up because he was taking everybody else's and just slamming them because nobody else cared about it. They were never going to use the thing, right? I wanted this to be a nice piece to look at the top of the toolbox. This guy was scratching up, so I put blue painter's tape. He got so mad. He said, "You do that just to make it hard for me." I'm like, "No, I'm trying to keep it from getting scratched." And over that, he docked me on attitude and work habits.
Oh, geez.
I remember that. I just thought that was something else.
Huh.
Yeah, Andrew Nelson said my son was the only one in his class who knew how to drill a pilot hole. At Virginia Tech, it was about like that. Now at New River, it was not quite like that. Yeah. Jody Pearson is saying we studied each component of the car for 2 weeks instead of transmissions one day and brakes the next, block learning. Well, we didn't do it that way. We had it, and I don't know how it was when you taught, but we had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Friday was a half day, but we would have, it was like university classes. You do Monday, Wednesday, the same class, the same time of day, Monday, Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have the same class, the same time of day, Tuesday, Thursdays. And usually your lab time was in the afternoon and your class time was in the morning. Occasionally they'd reverse it. But no, it was all throughout the year. The block learning thing, I've never had any class that ever did that. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a more modern thing.
For me, it was when I was asked to do this, I was asked by another racer who I raced with at my local track, and he was ahead of the whole automotive program. And he knew I did transmissions. Everybody knew I did transmissions at the shop, or I mean at the racetrack. So he called me out of desperation because he couldn't find anybody. And I tell you what, it was a crash course. I didn't know how much lab time I should have compared to how much book time to how much. So I would just read the first 2 chapters of what we were doing, and I'd set the book aside. And on my first day, we would grab transmissions on the back. I'm like, all right, guys, and this is the front, this is the back, and and I took one apart in front of everybody and put it together. Then I had them go grab other transmissions and do the same thing. So it was probably as I look back at it now, but not the best way as a teacher to teach, but the kids got it. Because I was taught by other people, so it's like I was just kind of taking that. And then when you have, what did I have? I think I had about 18 kids in each class.
Yeah.
I was
about right.
nervous. I tell you the truth, I was nervous, but I did it. I did. There was 2 semesters a year. I did both semesters. They were both night classes, and I did it for 4 years, I think. So it was really neat. It was a good experience. That's for sure.
That's
For
really
sure.
cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What kind of stuff did you learn from those students as they learned? Like, what kind of light bulb moments did they give you, like as far as how they learn things or things they did that you might not have expected them to do?
I learned the one thing I learned is not everybody learns at the same pace. Some kids you can tell one time, or even say it just barely off the top of your head one time, and they'll never forget. Some other kids had to be, sometimes you had to tell them 4 or 5 times. And I was probably one of those kids in high school because I was classified as having a learning disability throughout my whole time of all 12 years in school. And so I would just take a little extra time with that guy, and I found out that these guys definitely learned better by holding a set of pump gears in their hand and taking it over in the solvent tank and spinning the pump gears and seeing it squirt out compared to just reading it in the book.
And it's not just completely either or. There's a lot of people that will scoff at the academic side of things because they say, "Oh, they don't learn anything from the book." But I'll tell you, if you use both in the right balance, it goes a long way. Because there are
Yeah.
things that you can't necessarily just see on a bench, but you can read the theory, and then when you see them on the bench, you can do more with it because you know the theory. Like you can predict what it might do when you change what you're doing on the
Yeah,
bench.
that's true. But I tell you, there's also a feel to it.
Mhm.
And Lucas at my shop is picking up, and he's like a sponge right now.
Mhm.
And I would tell him, I go, it goes in like this, and you can tell him, you can show him, you can read a book, But until you get that feel of how that converter is supposed to go in and click in, there's a feel. And I say that to him 10 times a day. He goes, I can't get it. I can't get it. I go, what am I doing wrong? I go, Lucas, you're not doing nothing wrong. It's a feel. You got to feel it go in. And then once they get it that one time, boom, he's over there putting converters in for the other guy.
Well, it's like there are, but like I said, again, it's that each thing has its place. There are some things that the book is really good at, and there are some things experience nothing compares. Like, for example, one place where nothing compares to experience. There are no amount of words you could put in any book that tells somebody how to smoothly release a clutch pedal. Right? You tell me anybody who's ever read in a book, how to release a clutch pedal, then went out the first time and did it right. It doesn't happen. So there's definitely, both. And I've always been a big fan of not writing off the academic side of things.
Yeah.
As long as you balance it right. Because it's definitely. Buff has a good question for you. He's asking me, it's a good question for you. He wants to know how to get the smell of transmission fluid out of his hair and clothes and everything.
Oh, geez. You know what's funny about that? I know people who've been in the transmission business their whole life love that smell.
Ugh.
Like my little, I don't see my little sister, but my little sister stopped at my shop. I don't know, this was probably about 15 years ago. And she walked in and she took one smell and she goes, smells like Dad. Dad was nowhere near the shop. It was just the smell of fluid or solvents or whatever. So how do you get it off? I don't know. Wash your clothes and take a bath.
Yeah, I've never found anything good other than just clean up good and then let it wear. The worst is when they're burnt. One of the worst things I ever smelled in the shop, and this really says a lot because it's a shop, is guy brought in an 80s Chevy van, and he had burnt up high gear bad. And that fluid permeated the shop for days and days, that burnt transmission fluid. It was just black. He had just toasted all the clutches.
To jump on the schooling and the teaching thing about they don't show you, it's hard to teach someone how to take off at the clutch. Were you went to the Frank Holly School of Drag Racing?
Yeah.
Did they have a section in the book of how to cut a light?
Well, he taught it.
I know, but did they have a section in the book about that?
Well, yeah, he taught the section in the book, but of course, what he tells you is he says it's one of these things you can tell a lot of people, but experience and biomechanics are going to dictate what you can do, right? And it takes experience and biomechanics. And he says the best levers are the best people at staring. Like for instance, your eyes gather the data, but it's your brain that does the concentration, right?
Yeah.
And he said that he is an interesting guy, like not just about drag racing, but the way he thinks about everything, right? I mean, he's a really analytical guy, very left-brained. And he said that when we talk to people in conversation, we don't realize it, but we're actually we're not really looking right in their eyes for eye contact. We're scanning around different places on their face as we talk to them. He says there's some kind of aversion we have to staring directly into somebody's eyes. But it's perceived as eye contact. You're just actually looking at places, focusing different places on their face. And so we do the same thing when we're looking at the yellow light. So we're not actually looking at the bulb or at the LED or whatever. We're looking at different places at and around the light. And he said that when you get better at it, you're still looking at different places on the light, but every place you look on the light is where there's an LED or part of the bulb. You narrow that in, and when you can stare at that, you leave better. I thought that was really interesting. But again, doing it is a whole different thing.
When the trees were before they were LED, they were Thomas Edison bulbs.
Right.
I'm telling you, you can look at that bottom bulb, and in almost like in slow motion, you can see it blossoming before it comes all the way on. Mm-hmm. And that's how I would watch it and know when to leave.
Yeah.
Now that all these lights are LED, it's either on or off. There's no glow before it blossoms on. And to tell you the truth, I've become worse at the tree since LEDs came out. I just cannot get the hang of it.
I've never been good at either one. But you know, it's again another thing like that is teaching, you know, teaching firearms, teaching pistol shooting, teaching rifle shooting. I can tell you in one sentence how to make a perfect shot with a pistol, and that
Yeah.
is press the trigger fully without moving the front sight. It's that's it. That sentence is it. Now you can spend a lifetime doing that, but that one sentence is exactly what you have to do. So there's a lot of things like that. And,
I tell you, at my old shop, we used to shoot all the time. I was out in the cornfields, and I had a very experienced, very knowledgeable guy, and he would see me by going, not even going through one clip. He's like, I can see what you're doing wrong by holding the handgun and the way I squeeze my finger.
Mhm.
And it only took a short conversation, and man, my grouping was beautiful.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, it really is. You really appreciate someone else's knowledge when they show you how to do something like that.
Man, I've taught hundreds of students, and you pick up on the way people learn things.
Mm-hmm.
It is really interesting. And sometimes, and again, I'll give a trick away here, but when I've had a student who, like for instance, I had one time who was looking over the sights, trying to see the impact of the bullet. And I tell them, I say, listen, that target's not going to heal up. Where that thing hit while you're shooting is where that hole is still going to be after you're shooting, right? I promise. It's not going to move.
Yeah.
You don't need to try to look over the sights and see it. He insisted he wasn't doing that. I said, okay, well, let's try it again. And he shot half a magazine with his pistol. I said, all right, put your pistol down. And I gave him mine because I know the trigger's a little bit different. He shot perfectly because he wasn't used to that trigger. I said, see, that one went off before you had a chance to look and see where it was going.
Nice.
And see, after that, he was conscious of it. And he's like, okay, I'm going to press this 100% before I look. And he was fine. So sometimes teaching's finding that trick that helps somebody, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Scott Speed Shop says it's dinner time. Mr. Cope is an awesome dude. Well,
thank you.
And Mr. Cope is an awesome dude. Yes, I agree.
Thank you. And much respect back to you, Jed.
All right. So to tell you how the university views engines and powertrains, this is the cover of the syllabus. Yeah, it's a tractor, right? It's like has to be something noble. It can't just be something loud to do burnouts, right?
Right.
And if you want to know how exhilarating those classes were, that's what a test looks like. Okay. Yeah. If this just looks like something that you would rather die than repeat to most people, it certainly was. Oh, some of that stuff was rough. But I did find a test here. I found an old test. This is from BSc 2484. That would have been Biological Systems Engineering at Virginia Tech, sophomore class. I can gather only those two things from the number. All right, and it gives you formula. Oh, yeah, look at that. Look how academic that is. Formula AE, the Latin plural for formula. Oh, they did that kind of stuff all the time. Our teacher in there was a super nice guy, but he did not change his own engine oil. Okay. There was something. Yeah. So problem number 2 on this test, I got a kick out of. A 4-cylinder 2.5 liter Buick Skylark engine with overhead valves and throttle body fuel injection produces 110 horsepower at the flywheel at rated engine speed of 5,200 RPM when tested on an engine dynamometer. It says dynamometer tests also reveal frictional horsepower losses of 19 horsepower. What is the brake horsepower at rated engine speed for this engine? That's the kind of stuff we had to do. Just stuff like this.
Crazy.
I know, and I have never. What dyno tells you what the frictional losses are? Have you ever seen a dyno sheet that has a column for frictional losses?
No.
That'd be the most valuable dyno on earth, right? But you can see the disconnect between the theorists who don't go out and race their stuff and have never been in a dyno cell, right? I mean, that was, but it was a great experience. It was very interesting. We did have to rebuild a Briggs and Stratton engine, 3-horse Briggs and Stratton,
Mhm.
and uh, and I'll tell you that was a wild experience because they tried to rank the students by how much experience they had with different things, right? And there were students in there who had never used hand tools. I mean, they had never used wrenches and screwdrivers. I can't even imagine. And we're talking students, 19, 20, 21 years old that have never used hand tools.
Or or how to hold them.
No idea. No idea. It's like, do I hold the end that clicks and use it for a club, or do I use the round end and the click? I'm dead serious.
There's a little saying around the shop, because when Devin started, I mean, he's only 16, so he's still a greenhorn. Really great kid, but he didn't know how to hold simple hand tools like a wrench or whatever, and I would call it chopsticks. So
Wow.
now, because how awkward is it to eat anything with chopsticks for us who eat
Oh,
with
yeah.
forks and knives? So it was just a way to put a little funny spin on it. And I would, now you hear it through the shop. If you're using a tool wrong, there's someone out there that screams chopsticks.
But it's funny you say that because I've never had any luck using chopsticks. I'm one of these people who thinks, why don't you just hold them both side by side? Because now it's twice as wide to eat with,
Yeah,
right?
right,
I mean,
right.
that's the only thing that makes any sense to me.
I'd always say, do you ever try eating cereal with chopsticks? It's impossible. And you holding that wrench right that way to get that bolt out is impossible.
The one that I see a lot of are younger people who don't know how to read a tape measure. That's a really common one. I went to school with a guy at Tech. His name was Ray, and he helped me move one time. And I said, "Can you measure that door?" Because we wanted to move something through it. He had no idea how to read a tape measure. And it's just amazing to me. It's like, here this guy has, I don't know, he was probably a junior or senior at the time. And, I mean, he made it through a couple years to Corps cadets and yet could not read a tape measure. It's just amazing to me. I mean, but
Well,
anyway,
it's a good thing you didn't give him a 2x4 and ask him to measure it,
yeah,
because we all know that 2x4s don't measure 2x4 anymore.
right.
It's just the name.
Look at some of this boring stuff. Check this out. These were all just formulas for figuring things like volumetric efficiency and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that that's what we did in there. One thing I was looking for that was interesting, and I will come across it soon enough, was my cheat sheet for building my first performance transmission.
Really?
Yes, and it was great. It was all handwritten notes that I had gotten from different sources and places. Most of them from Kevin Justice at Justice Racing Transmissions in Iowa.
Was this pre-internet?
The internet was around, but it was nobody
Nothing.
used it. Yeah, it was a thing that you
Okay.
got email on. That's all,
Okay.
right? Like, people weren't carrying cell phones. The internet existed, but most people had an email, but you still got paper syllabuses and stuff like that. But no, I remember I would have to use the payphone in the hallway to call. Had a certain I would use the payphone in the hallway, and it was miserable because that payphone was right next to the stairwell that went upstairs in Martin Hall. And people were going back and forth, slamming the doors, and yakking. It was all I could do to hear, right? And this is a long distance phone call. So you can forget trying to drop quarters. I got a card, a prepaid card, and you would call the number and you'd add minutes. This is just an ancient, thing, but that's how I had to do it. But I got a lot of those notes, different things like converting the front pump to a non-lockup stuff like that. Um, you do the more elegant 62 thousandths clutches and select snap rings to get an extra clutch in the drum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the way he done it and the way I did my first one was I actually turned that plate down a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And you don't get as much heat sink, right? So you probably wouldn't want to do that in a tow vehicle, but it, it worked,
Yeah.
right?
When you learned that or your notes, which transmission is it on, John?
This is on a 999.
Okay.
Yep.
Your
So I
favorite.
remember, yeah, I love the 9. That's my favorite Chrysler transmission ever. Favorite any transmission.
Uh-huh.
So we took that course, and they said that you can build one of your own in here. And I went to the junkyard that weekend, and I got a 999 out of a Dakota. I think it was a 90 model Dakota, and I still have it. I still have it, and I glass beaded the case. The case looks real nice on it, and everything, But it could use some attention now. But it was interesting. It was a more primitive way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Like taking the strut for second gear. Didn't have the nice billet stuff then, so we stacked two and welded them up, kind of stuff. But I got pages and pages of notes from that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got some of these handouts that actually I thought were really interesting. I studied planetary gears until my eyes crossed.
Yeah, that's the engineering part. That's the part I like them best.
Oh yeah. There was plenty of this too. So some of it just like this kind of stuff was the stuff that punished you into oblivion. This is the stuff that I'm convinced they give you just to see if you'll quit, right? That kind of stuff. But this was the stuff I thought was just crazy fun. This kind of thing, right? Andy Woods in the house. Kyle Till sneaked in here.
What's up, Andy?
Fun. Well, I see Mexican Spec in here. Sand Mountain Ballistics got in here when we weren't looking. Let's see here. I try not to miss people when they come in. Drag Pack Merc said the payphone trick never worked for me. Well, I was determined. I tried. Danny Boyd said I couldn't do any math after geometry. Yeah, I'll tell you, it gets really weird and abstract after geometry. Really, it does. Trigonometry I always thought was fun. Man, there's some weird stuff out there. Don't like that. I always thought the best way to describe a tangent, a tangent of a circle, when you take a segment out from point to point, was the shopping cart that has the flat wheel on it. Where a shopping cart gets a locked up wheel and somebody pushes it until it makes a flat spot.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that was the perfect example of tangent. Russell J. Finch says, Cope, I like how you have implemented bearings in place of washers. Talk about your rollarized stuff.
I wasn't the first to do that. And it does help, if you go ahead and replace all the bearings with washers. I think the one that actually helps the best is having that output shaft on a bearing instead of on a regular aluminum support. That output shaft can build up a lot of heat going 130 or 40 or whatever, however fast your car is in a quarter mile. So putting a bearing on there and letting it right in the bearing definitely keeps it cool.
So here's a good question Big Belly Racing's got here. Any benefits to painting a transmission case?
Yeah, it looks pretty.
Any particular color recommended?
I just got off the phone with my friend Chris, who I've known since I was 10 years old, and he brought me his Dodge truck, and I did the transmission for him, and I painted it pink because I was goofing with them. So I painted them red, white, and blue, but for a longest time when my son still worked at the shop, we wouldn't paint them at all. We would just glass bead everything and use the gold bolts. And I think that's probably the coolest look. But no, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help. Um, I always like painting it somewhat of a light color because if you paint it black, it's a little bit harder to see if you got a leak or not. But yeah, it doesn't hurt at all. And there's no benefit to it. There's really no benefit to it.
That's cool. Mike Iben, our resident torque converter guy, he builds torque converters for a living. He says bearings in place of washers helps torque converters live longer when they are abused.
Oh yeah.
Well, Mike, I fully plan on using mine really hard. So just saying. Kyle Teal is he's getting all academic with us. VME, you talking about volumetric efficiency? Actual flow delivered by a pump at a given pressure by its theoretical flow. Theoretical flow is calculated by multiplying the pump's displacement per revolution by its driven speed. Okay. All I remember is that in theory, the higher volumetric efficiencies were things that were not naturally aspirated. It was just, like I said, it was an experience. But it was different because in the university, they want you to try to understand some theoretical stuff. And then when you go to community college, much less theory and much more hands-on.
Oh yeah.
Very different. The one thing I can say about a community college I thought was extremely lacking, even 20 years ago, we did absolutely nothing with a carburetor. When I say nothing, I mean, he took a quadrijet, the teacher did, and he said, just take a look at this. You'll never actually work on one, and passed it around, handed it to one student, and that student just passed it down the row. That was all of the carburetor education at that school. 100%.
Well, you got to wonder, John, with all the kids going to school today learning automotive, if the government phases out cars and are not cars but diesel engines and gas engines, and all that's left is a motor, what mechanical skills would you need? I mean, think about what the automotive future is going to look like even just in 10 years with the government pushing and forcing car companies to transfer over to electric vehicles, which they're not electric, they're battery.
Well, speaking of that, I'm glad you mentioned that because I got this story sent to me today. Let me pull it up here. This was a Tesla on the interstate in Pennsylvania bursts into flames.
Yep.
This Tesla, let me zoom in on this. It drove over something in the road. When it drove over something in the road, it bumped the battery compartment and caught it on fire. And that thing burned. It took them 2 hours to put the fire out, and you could only recognize it from the wheels. And if you look at that photo, there's 2 uprights there. I guess the B pillars, the seat frames, the wheels, and some pieces of drivetrain, and all that's left of that car. Fortunately, the driver and passenger got out, so they weren't cremated on site. But it took 2 hours to put it out, and it's all because it drove over something and bumped the battery tray and she got a short. That electric car business scares me, but
that car almost looks like my Coronet after I blew up the Trance in 1992.
Yeah. Right. Surprised the wheels didn't melt. Yeah, it took them 2 hours to put that fire out. But no, when I go by the school today, every now and then, like maybe once a year, I'll drive up in there. And I remember when I was there, we had project vehicles everywhere. GM used to donate cars, and Toyota. GM and Toyota would donate cars all the time. And we had some cars and trucks there that would have, say, 5 miles on them or 7 miles on them. And yet everything under the hood would be a disaster because people had been taking them apart and putting them back together for years, right? But they would have 7 miles on them. It was amazing. And yet, how many times you ever work on a car with 7 miles on it and you'll look at a bolt that has no threads left on it?
Yeah.
And it was that bizarre kind of thing. And they couldn't ever sell the cars. They couldn't even sell the parts off of them. They had to completely destroy them. Like everything, interior pieces, all kinds of perfectly good stuff had to be completely destroyed and scrapped. But we had lots of stuff like that. And if you go by there now, they used to have a dyno, that's gone, a chassis dyno. They used to have a transmission dyno, that's gone. I was fully planning to use that here a couple of years ago, and nope, it's gone. Um, all of the project cars are gone. When you drive back there now, there's a little bit of junk in the field. Just looks like scrap, but I don't see cars going in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even driven up and looked in the doors one time after hours, and there's no students' cars in there anymore. See, that was a big thing when I was there. Students would bring their cars and they would work on them. There was a guy named Chris there that had a Malibu, ran high sevens. He drove it on the street and raced it. And, my friend Joe Ringel bring his Volkswagen. And I remember a lot of these project cars. Some of them were pretty cool. I don't see any of that anymore. I don't see any students' cars around. I don't see any, cars in there that are parked anymore. And it makes me wonder what the curriculum is like. Nobody's doing any kind of projects, it seems like, ever that I've been by there. It's just, it's creepy and empty at this trade school now. And it's kind of terrifying because I wonder, like, what experience are your new ASE trained technicians having when they're in school? Is it all just with laptops now and replacing components when the laptop says they're bad? Is that all they're doing now? I mean, I guess.
I can remember when I worked at the dealer in the 90s before I opened up the shop, some of the guys that were there in the 70s were complaining that they don't rebuild starters and alternators no more.
Yeah.
And it was nothing for us. Like, oh, alternator's bad, just go get another one and replace it, but they would actually spread those things apart and clean bushings or do whatever they had to do. So I think as time progresses, I mean, you can't remember there used to be a radiator shop in one in every town or every other town.
Absolutely. Yep.
You can't not go get a radiator repaired anymore.
You know what? Roanoke had two. Bluefield had one. You're right. Every town had a radiator shop.
Yeah.
And it's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And it's all these cheap $100 Chinese radiators.
Yeah.
Mike Ivan says the tech school I went to no longer has a machinist course. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, it's concerning me because it just makes me wonder what they're teaching. I mean, there's no transmission dyno. Well, are they still rebuilding transmissions anymore? Or is it where everything's going to the CVT and 8 and 10 speeds? Or are they just hooking a computer to it and then just R&Iing the whole thing?
I see Mike Rowe talking a lot about bringing back shop class to high schools.
Yeah.
Just basic shop class, how to make a birdhouse and, how to work on a car or whatever. And they took that they took all that out of the high schools too.
Well, it's not just about the crafts themselves as much as it is, a student that learns how to just do the measuring, and welding and these kind of things. It requires thinking. It requires understanding the problem to solve it. I think that just helps foster more intelligent students who are better at solving problems and better at thinking, better at critical thinking. And it's just, I don't know, it just seems kind of lost. I was at Bluefield College where I went to school from 94 to 96. And it was I don't know, it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday night or something. And there was nobody, I bet I didn't see a half a dozen students in the library, administration building, the science building, all these places that used to be packed with students all the time on an evening. And I think it's because they've all retreated to their dorm rooms and just get on the internet. that whole socialization part of it is gone. And I don't know. I think that's missing. I did a lot of mechanical work when I was a student there. There's all kinds of people, all kinds of students need to work done on their cars, And it would always ramp up about a week or two before time to go home for the semester, because if their car had died on them, say in October, and they got to go home for Thanksgiving, they would start getting antsy about it because they've been catching rides for weeks and haven't cared. But now it was time to get mobile because they got to go a couple 100 miles, right? So did a lot of that stuff, but that kind of stuff just seems like it's going away. When you were teaching, were students bringing in their own transmissions? Could they do like a project transmission then?
They could, and quite a few of them did. I remember this one kid had a 73 Challenger with a 440 and a 727, and it took almost the whole semester, but they brought it in. They did the R&R. We took it apart. We, because the class was only 1 day a week. It wasn't like every day. So I taught 1 day a week. So it took us a while to get it done. But we would stay afterwards and go beyond when the class. But yeah, it was great. The kids, I encouraged that they would bring their own stuff in, because it wasn't like doing just a transmission that they had on the bench, then you put it back in the storage room. The guys had to go for a test drive. They got to see, oh, we have to adjust the linkage. You know what? The kickdown isn't just right. So there was more learning. Are the U-joints good? See, these two are dowel pins. Those have to be there. Things like that you just don't get by just tearing down a transmission and putting it back together and putting it back in the storage room.
So you guys did a lot of R&I and that kind of thing. Well, what other people taught there, and what kind of program was it in general?
As far as it was a regular college. I would guess you would call it a community college, and it was Prairie State College in Chicago Heights, Illinois. It's still there. Well, they had a really nice automotive department and with huge labs. I mean, and they would have a different teacher for everything. So they had one teacher for suspension and brakes. They had another teacher for transmissions and driveline, which that's what I did when I was there. They'd have an engine teacher. Then they would teach the business aspect of it. Then they'd have a parts class. And so what they did is, after you took every class, not only did you pass the class, then you got your ASC certification test that you had to take. So you can do two of things, pass, get the credits for the class, and then get your ASC certification, which I didn't have when I went there my first year.
I didn't either, but they wanted me to. I still have the book they gave me.
They made me get the test. So I had to become ASC certified. And the only reason why I did it is because the college says you have to have some documentation that says you know what you're doing. And I'm like, well, would you want to go for a ride in my race car?
Yeah.
I was going to pull the old Henry Ford, jump in the GT40 with me.
You're right. Yeah.
One of those kind of a things.
Yeah, they go for riding the Coronet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I took it there. I took the Coronet there for every class, and I got it off the trailer. I got there about a half hour early and brought it inside the classroom in the lab, just to kind of like show them, like, well, listen, I've made my living doing transmissions, and this is a perk from it. Kind of show them the fruits of your labor, so to say. I really wanted to even though it wasn't part of the curriculum, I also wanted the kids to know the business end of transmissions, not just working on a car. So that's why we had the field trip going to the Trans Parts of Indiana, and I brought my car there, and it was a good experience. I would be a way better teacher now than I was at 25 or 27. How old was I? 27. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
This is the car, for those of you who don't know.
Woo, look at that sexy thing.
68 Coronet with a 440.
Damn.
How would you like your teacher to have brought that to class? This was before Mr. Haney number 2, the truck that he brought to the No Name Nationals.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And I guess your students were all over the map in skill and ability and stuff like that. And that's just the way
They
it's going.
were there were some kids that I remember I had an older gentleman in there who went. I think he was in a union and he got free schooling and he was just there to get the money for schooling.
Yeah,
But 90% of the kids that were there to learn.
yeah,
They wanted to learn. And I wouldn't give anybody any treatment, but if someone took me to the side and said, "Hey, could you show me a little extra?" They all wanted to know about the racing stuff. And I
Mhm.
says, we got to know how it works in stock form
Yep,
before we can lean on the racing stuff.
yep, absolutely.
So it was a good experience, and I got a little pension coming from it.
Ah, cool.
They
That's
won't let me. They won't let me put into it. I can't put money into that pension unless I go back to school teaching.
huh.
So it ain't gonna be. It ain't gonna be nothing
That's
really,
interesting.
because I was only
Now,
there 3 years.
now, how were navigating the politics? Now, this was before everything went woke and out of its mind, right? So, but even back then, how was navigating the general? When I say politics, the politics of a university is separate than politics like you're thinking Democrat,
Yeah,
Republican. It's different. Okay, universities and schools and colleges have their own kind of politics. How did you navigate that?
I stayed out of it. I didn't see it. I didn't know. I didn't know no one. I didn't go to the Christmas parties. I didn't go to any of the meetings. I went there to teach the kids in the time that I was supposed to be there, and I
Excellent.
left.
That's great.
Yeah, there's no way. Have you've seen pictures of me with long hair?
Yeah.
I look like a hippie, and I was one of the teachers. So no, I stayed out of it. Stayed real clear of it.
We did have one question, and then I'm going to give you this one. One of them is a general. Are you working on anything new, or is there an improvement you're looking to make to the 727 904 or any of the 4678 RE stuff? Anything that's coming up soon? Any improvements there? And then I have a question from Heavens Mopar. If I rebuild a 904 or 727 myself for the first time, are there specific tools that I will need? And if so, do you sell them?
I'm not a tool guy, so I don't. Um, but you'll need basic hand tools. The only two tools that I think that you'll have to buy other than basic hand tools is a press to get the clutch pack springs in and out, and some bushing drivers.
You can make that press with all thread, and you can make a
You could.
press.
Yes, and I've seen guys do that, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, you
What
could.
I've always told the guys, if they only need like, let's say I I need the front pump bushing and the tail housing done, and go to your local trans shop and bring the bushings or even buy it from them and say, hey, could you press this in for me? 95% of the time the guys would be like, sure. They'll even bring you in the back of the shop and press it in and show you how it works. You got a tool there, John?
This is what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's a
This is
press.
what I have to press the that big spring in the drum right here. This
But
guy
that
right.
goes in a vise.
Yep. 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 Well, or you can bolt it on the bench, but it needs to be
Oh, I
bolted
see.
down. Yeah. But I'll tell you, there are people who say you can do it with clamps, and you can. But man, that's dangerous.
It's hard.
It's
It
hard,
is.
and it can be dangerous if it slips.
Yeah.
Not dangerous like coil spring on a car or anything like that, but it can be. It can be. But you know what? I do enough of them that it's worth having that. And these don't cost much. This is just the cheap one that I found. But it works.
I don't know if I told you this before or not, John, but I actually, I think it was in the 2002, 2003. I had an open transmission class at my shop, and it was for racing transmissions only.
Oh, neat.
And it was an 8-hour class, and I think I only charged $100.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think I only had 6 students. I put 2 students per bench, and each one of them had a 727. We spent about 4 hours on disassembly and assembly, and the other 6 hours or so, or 4 hours or so, talking about all the different performance items like drums and sprags and planetaries. And I had all that laid on the bench. And that was really, really cool.
That is cool. And by the way, since you mentioned yourself with long hair, we'll put this up for
Jeez.
people. That's about 1993, I want to say.
Yeah,
94.
yeah. My cornet was only running 1109s then.
And you would have looked like this when you taught school.
That was at school when that picture was
Yeah.
taken.
There
Yeah.
you go. How about that?
Look how skinny I was too.
That's a good. By the way, this is my contact picture for Cope right here.
Oh, geez.
That's what comes up if he calls right there. But no, I think that's neat that you did that. That's a neat idea, doing a seminar on it, kind of like what Vizard does with head porting. You did it with transmissions. I think that's neat.
Yeah.
Let's
You
see.
know, I did it out of desperation. Things were really slow. That was about a year after the housing crash went down.
Yeah.
And it was really, really rough for us. And I'm like, I had to do something to generate some income.
Yeah.
And a little buzz around the shop. I only did it one time. I lost my voice after that day.
Talk about, I remember exactly how bad it was when that housing market bottomed out, because that's how I make a living. I lived right through that. 2011, 2010 and 11 were the worst years ever. 2011 was my worst year in business ever.
Yeah.
I made $19,000, and I remember that's gross. And I remember specifically that year, that was when the housing market was like flat on its face. I remember in April of 11, the entire company put $200 in the bank off of some referral check or something. The whole company. So,
can you imagine that?
Oh, I don't ever want. I can imagine it because I did it once, but I don't ever want to do it again. So, going back to Scott's question on special tools, if you're building a transmission just in general, you definitely want a good pair of snap ring pliers. You need good snap ring pliers, because the universal ones, the ones where you change the end, they just don't cut it. Do yourself a favor and get some good ones. You don't have to spend a lot, but you can go to a flea market, a swap meet, pawn shops, and you can get good quality snap ring pliers in a couple different sizes, internal, external, and you're in business. I think one of those little small plastic hammers is useful too. But you don't have to spend much of anything to have the tools you need to do, like a 727 or 904. Any thoughts to that? You got to make a slide hammer of some kind to get the pump out, or use a piece of flat bar, which is what I do.
I actually don't pick up a slide hammer at all to pull the pumps out. What I do is I remove the valve body and remove the pump bolts, and I just put a screwdriver in between the front drum and the sun shell and give it one swift boop. Yep. And you can't do that on a 904 because the pump depth is really deep on a 904. The pump sits way in the case, but on a 727, it just maybe a quarter of an inch, and you just take a screwdriver and you pop it right out of there.
I've never thought about that difference between the two, but now that you say that, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, if you look and see, there's a huge part of the machine area of the case that you can see above the pump on a 904 that you do not see on a 727. Yeah. See, with the 904, not only do you need a pump puller, you need two of them. Because you have to evenly pull that pump out. It'll cock in the case so easily. So I should reframe that. I do use a pump puller when I do 904s or 999s, especially if it's a junkyard unit and it's been sitting for 20 or 30 years.
Mhm. So, Scott, the different ways you can do it. If you want to make that puller, you can either use a little light slide hammer, just a little light one, or what I have is I have a piece of 1-inch square tube, and I've got 2 holes drilled in it, and they are the right distance apart. And I just got 2 pieces of all thread. I spin in there with a nut, and then I just spin a wrench on them, and it pops it right out.
Yep.
So that's different ways you can do it.
I've seen these tools in the transmission industry that it's a piece of metal that has a threaded nut on it, and you couple it to the splines of the stator, and
Ah,
when you spin on the nut, it pushes on the input shaft and pulls the pump
yeah,
out.
yeah, that's neat.
Kind of like a power steering puller in a
Yeah,
way.
that's an elegant way to do it.
Yeah. But to Scott's point, I want to tell you firsthand, you'll get so much satisfaction, some self gratification from doing your own transmission. I always try to encourage that because it's a natural high that you get when you accomplish something like that. You got it in your car, you take your buddy, you're like, yep, I did this transmission.
Yeah.
There really is some good satisfaction out of that. So my hats off to you. Go out there and build transmissions.
Oh yeah, and I've kind of wondered why, just philosophically, why people don't. I've wondered why people don't have as much interest in building them as they do engines, and I think the reason is that nobody's ever popped a hood to show off a transmission,
True.
and I really think that that's why they're not as appreciated. But when that car makes those really nice, crisp upshifts, you know,
Hmm.
that is not the engine doing that, right? So yeah, I guess depends how much you care. All right, if you get to pick 3 things that people should never do when they build a transmission, 3 things, what would they be?
Just building, not driving.
Yes, just building one.
Ooh, that's a good one, John.
3
What
nevers.
what not to do? Don't use blocker rods and plastic accumulators.
Okay, you showed that on. So if you haven't seen that video, go back and watch. Got a recent video. What happens when you
Yeah.
do that?
I would
And by
say
the way, what happens when that does break and the piston moves down? What does that do performance-wise?
well, with my valve body, there's no oil on top of the accumulator, only at the bottom. So every time you shift it into second gear, the oil normally would just scuff the bottom of the accumulator and go onto the servo. Well, with that hole in the accumulator, all the fluid was going up around the blocker rod and out the hole in the case. So it was giving them second gear issues.
Ah, okay.
That gentleman, he's a super nice guy. He begged me to build him a tranny, and I says, "Listen, I'm really sticking to my guns. I'm not going to do it, but I will give you all the parts you need and all the technical help you can want." He bought all my parts. I mean, he dropped like $5,000 on valve bodies, billet drums. Because he did a 46 for a Gen 3 Hemi.
Mhm.
You got the shifter, the cross member, everything. Then he had someone do it. It failed in 400 miles. So he called me. He's like, "What do I do?" And I felt so bad for this guy. I says, "Listen, you're tugging at my heartstrings." He owned a shipping company. I said, "Wrap up that transmission torque converter and ship it to me, and I'll fix it for you." So that broken accumulator is that gentleman's transmission.
Man.
Yeah.
Wild Rose Garage, we're going to come back to your question. But no plastic accumulator with a blocker rod. That would
Yeah.
be one.
The second thing, this is probably a big one, and this, if you're going to do a 904, a 999, or a 998, use one transmission and one transmission only, because between the early, the late, the night, all those different 904s, if you're a beginner, you really, really have to pay attention to all the different plastic or all the different planetaries versus wide ratio, narrow ratio, thick drum or wide, all the different scenarios. There's probably, I think I counted 6 different versions of the 904. So do not do a 904 unless you do one tranny. Get a core and do that tranny. If you try to like just grab parts of everything, it'll overwhelm you and you will make a mistake. So even today, if I had to do a transmission, I don't keep transmissions apart on the shelf of 999s and 904s like I do with 727s. Because 727s, you got push buttons, you got early, and you got late, and you got lockup. So it's really, really easy. So even when I do a 904, I grab the whole unit, pull it down, have the guys tear it apart, and I put that whole unit together. So if I need one piece, like a broken sun shell or broken this, then I'll go get that piece. But when if you're a 999 or 904 guy, start on one tranny and keep focused on that year tranny, because it's really easy to make a mistake with 904s because there's so many different changes throughout the years. And they're little bitty changes. They're little things like you're like, oh yeah, it's the same, until you look really deep into it and you're like, oh man, that's a different year.
Like a different ceiling ring or something that's just so little difference that it wouldn't work. But that kind of thing.
Yep. So that would be a good thing.
That's 2.
Number 3, what should you not do when building transmissions? Don't do them on your living room table, for one.
Not dining room. That's okay, though.
Or your dining room table, especially on Thanksgiving.
Come on, man. Gotta got some slack.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else, John, what not to do.
All right.
The best advice I can give you is it is not rocket science. I'm not a scholar. I'm just a grease monkey. And don't be afraid. And if you make a mistake, so what?
Yeah.
You will learn more from your mistakes than you will anything. Because believe me, if you're like, oh, you know what? I left that inner lip seal out of that direct drum. I had no third gear, had no reverse. You will remember that 40 years later. You will always remember your mistakes. So get out in the garage, get yourself a core, and build those transmissions.
So when somebody says they scare me, just do it. Yeah,
there's
get over it.
There's nothing to it.
So Wild Rose has a good question we'll grab here. Wild Rose says, how's it going, guys? And I can hear him saying that because he opens his videos. How's it going, Question, is there a way to make a homebrew full manual 727?
Well, there's 2 ways to do it. One, if you buy the valve body, but I think what he's saying, what he might be asking, is how he can make his own valve body from that. And yes, there is. Transco sells a TF-3 kit, and that's the part number, TF-3. It is very good explanation of how to turn your valve body into a forward manual. So yes, you can do that at home. And the good thing about the TF-3 is it does have low band apply in first gear.
Okay.
Yep.
And again, you're recommending Transgo. I've used the B&M Transpack, more expensive kit. They have a manual option for doing theirs. What do you think of that kit?
I've used B&M kits a lot on 700s. I just took a valve body part to make it automatic shift, and I see it had the B&M kit in it. There's nothing wrong with the B&M kit. But in the Chrysler world, and I don't mean as builders, but in the Chrysler transmission world, as far as the do-it-yourselfer, Transco shines the highest out there. Or I should say it's the most popular.
Note that he said in the Chrysler world, because your results can vary depending on what you're working on, whereas a TH350 versus 727, etc.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
But I've found out for even though those Transco kits say this is for professional use only, it is for beginners. They give you pictures and descriptions, and they also got a good tech service. So if you, and I used to know his name, I can't remember his name. Was it Transco Bob? I don't remember.
Transco Bob. I like that.
That they got a good tech department if you make a mistake, but if you follow the instructions, you really shouldn't. You should. But the pictures are real good. I mean, B&M does an okay job. I'm not taking anything away from B&M, and I've used a lot of their kits.
Well, feel
But-
free to endorse and tell us what you do and don't like and why. Feel free, because we're just looking to get from your experience and
Okay.
expertise.
My
No
own.
one sponsors this show.
Yeah, no one sponsors this.
No,
show.
Nolan is
No one sponsors this show.
Nolan is a good dude, and he's a real warrior. He goes out in the shop and he works, and I think that as far as YouTube goes, he is definitely one of the most successful at making junk work and work well.
Good for him.
That's a good niche. That's not
Yeah.
easy. A lot of people can throw money at a problem, and that guy, he gets really good results using stuff other people wouldn't dare.
Yeah, good for him.
So I really respect what he does. Let's see here. What Andy has I just see a comment from Andy says, "I've failed then." I don't even know what he's talking about, but I don't even know. J. Russell Finch, or Russell J. Finch, almost was it always been Russell J. Finch, or has he changed it on here? Russell J. Finch. John, thoughts on swapping the large bushing drum and shaft from a later 727 onto an older one?
From a later to the older, it's real easy. All you do is use the stator. And if it's 66 and earlier, what has a 19 spline, then you can change the input shaft. But yeah, I do that quite a lot. Quite a lot. I see Dakota had a really good question about a 350. Dakota's timeout. You see that, John?
Yeah, hang on a minute. Andy says building a transmission in the house. I guess that's what he's not allowed to do. Let's go up and grab Dakota's. Dakota says, Cope, I'm sure you've done TH350s. What shift kits do you like? I've heard Transgo kits are better than B&M.
They're both good, but if you want to save a buck, a turbo 350, all you need to do is drill both of the accumulators, and whammo, it becomes a slammer. And I bet you if you Google those two holes of which two holes to drill, I know which one they are off the top of my head, but I don't have a 350 separator plate. You don't have to do nothing but drill those two holes. One's for second gear, one's for third, and then block off both accumulators, and it'll work great. And you don't have to buy either of the kits. But to answer the man's question, I would say they're probably equal. There's nothing one does better than the other. So if you're shopping around, figure out which one's cheaper than the other. And I bet you the B&M's cheaper.
Now, Nolan from Wild Rose Garage, he, with his TH350s, I believe in a video, he said he has had better experience with the B&M. Now, that said, I know that Bad Tree Productions, with their torque flights, have had better experience with the Transgo. And you can find different opinions from guys who have built good working transmissions here on YouTube. So this is just lots of different opinions here. But I got to tell you, Dakota, it sounds like it's up your alley to try Cope's suggestion of drilling those two accumulator passages.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find that separator two holes you drill and then just use blocker rods in the accumulator.
Now, Wild Rose is saying on a TH350 to make full manual, I weld the governor weights and the shift valve in the valve body. Then it doesn't think and drive as third only.
Yeah, that's pretty easy to do. It's a poor man's cheap way of doing it. What you're doing is you're giving it so much governor pressure, the valve body thinks you're going 100 miles an hour. And what is governor pressure? It raises the PSI 1 mile per hour for every 1 psi per mile per hour. Think of it as a hydraulic vehicle speed sensor.
Huh.
The governor is a vehicle speed sensor, but instead of using an electrical pulse, it uses hydraulic pulses. So it's a great way to do it. But a true manual valve or a true manual shift uses the manual valve and nothing else.
Wild Rose is asking a follow up. What about shimming the tire pressure? What about shimming the pressure regulator in the TH350?
Yeah, you can do that. But you can also leave it alone, drill the 2 holes and block off the 2 accumulators, and she'll slam pretty hard. She'll almost be too hard if you drill out those holes too big.
Well, Dakota's saying right on, D&M is cheaper by a bunch, but knowing what you told me, my new direction will be drilling 2 holes. Dakota, all right, here's the deal. You get to come here and learn that free from Cope, but now we want you to make a video of it and post it
There
on
you go.
right? That's the
And
deal, right?
And if he can't find those 2 holes, if Dakota emails me a picture of the separator plate, I'll be more than happy to show him which 2 holes and how big to drill them so he can do that.
So the Cope Racing Trans at AOL.com.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the email.
Mm-hmm.
And Dakota, if you need it, just let me know. I'll get it to you. Okay. But all right. But so again, make us a video when you do that now. Put it on your channel. We want to see it. Do a before and after. How cool is that? Any of you guys have any other questions? I mean, it's just flown by tonight. Wild Rose is saying he's run both kits in a TH350. The B&M shifts harder, but as far as life length, no idea. All right. Well, no, Nolan really runs his stuff. He runs his stuff hard. So if there's a guy who tests his stuff, he's a good one to look at for that. And Andy's saying this is why John Cope is awesome, always willing to help one out.
As are you, Andy. I sent him some messages via text. He answered all my questions about the camshaft questions I had. So my hat's off to you, Andy. Thank you so much. I respect your knowledge when it comes to performance in racing.
Andy resembles that remark. He's willing to help one out. He's a good dude like that.
Yes, he is.
And since Andy does not have channel stickers, that was the reason this got here. Seriously. No, I'm not even kidding. See, all these other people had channel stickers way back there.
Right.
So when this flew out the side of that block, this is Andy's channel sticker. That was what it was before all these channels had their own channel stickers.
That'd be a great contest for everybody in the community, is to come up with their own little special sticker, and then Andy can pick one out and then go ahead and get them made.
Well, yeah, I was going to say he's got a logo. He uses his logo.
Oh, he does? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'd make a great channel sticker. But I have the channel sticker before they were vinyl stickers.
Well, if Andy wants to go ahead, I will authorize the use of a picture of Mr. Haney that he can put on all his channel stickers.
There you go. Stephen Oates is asking, John, I have a remanufactured 904 factory high stall. Are they any good for a street build?
As long as it's mild. A factory high stall. I would have think he's talking about Mopar Performance factory high stall. Or
sure.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't have a ton of cam, the factory makes good stuff. Yeah, it really does.
So now that it's been in there a while, how's the rear gear doing in Mr. Haney?
It's singing its ass off.
I'll tell you what, I got to drive it right after that. I mean, seriously, you probably hadn't put 10 miles on it since you put it in when you brought it to Sykeston, had you?
I raced the snot of it. We drove it around town. We drove it at the race. I came home and I made two hits with the draggy, and it started making noise.
Huh.
So I will say this. I used the same manufacturer for both gears, and the serial numbers were 1 digit away from each other. So I'm going to just try a different manufacturer because you can almost put a Ford 9-inch together with a shovel and it'll be fine. I'm serious. So to have two gears make the exact same noise. So right now, Russell, the rear end is not good in Haney.
Unity Motorsports Garage. Andy is saying he wants a shirt with Casper and Mr. Haney on the back. Well, I'll tell you what.
That'd be cool.
Why don't you get Casper and Mr. Haney lined up at the track, and I'll take that photo for you guys. How about that? Nolan from Wild Rose is saying, great learning from the trans pros tonight. He says that in the plural. There's not two Copes over there. There's just one. Is it blurry? He says it's
he must be talking about you, John, not me. I never
I'm a hack. I just like transmissions. I'm a hack.
I've never had a torque flight on my dinner table.
So, again, sometimes people in the audience, there's new folks in here. My Thanksgiving 2020 video, it just might have a 904 torque flight on a Thanksgiving dinner table. It just might. And the Christmas video that year just might have something under the Christmas tree. You just might want to go watch them if you haven't seen them. I put that on there because what was it? In the video that the Cope Racing Transmissions video today, Lucas, the new young builder, he said that this would go good under the Christmas tree, this transmission. And I said, how uncivilized. Transmissions don't go under Christmas trees. Engines do. Transmissions go on the dining room table. So, all right. Scarlett, the four-eyed Cuda, saying, Cope, any value to removing casting flash on a transmission? I know for engine blocks it helps and removes stress risers. Any value in removing casting flash on your automatic?
Oh, yeah. And it's the same value you would get out of it doing if it's on a cylinder heads or an engine block. Without a doubt.
Well, look at this. Drag Pack Merc already wants to buy one of those shirts with Haney and Caspers. There you go. You guys line them up. I'll take the picture. Now, see, here's a guy with some style and class. Transmissions don't belong in the kitchen. That's why they invented bathtubs. I totally agree. That's the highest and best use of a bathtub, in my opinion. Darren's Trucks, Mr. Cope or Wilburn, have you ever had any repairing or rebuilding of Eaton Fuller 18-speed semi-truck transmissions?
Well, I can officially say no on that one.
No. The closest I've ever come to that is a friend of mine had one in a dump truck. It was something like that, and he was showing me because I asked him. It had a weird pattern to it. Like they don't have a pattern like a car. Okay, they have a pattern that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it comes back to you. It was bizarre, and he was trying to explain to me how you drive it. And I thought, man, I would never remember all of that. But no, I've never R&I'd or built one or anything. Nothing like that. What is the wildest transmission you've done? I would say for me it would be probably a 5-speed automatic transaxle for a front wheel drive. That was a wild and crazy one. I did that one in school. I don't ever really want to do another one. What would be the wildest transmission you've ever built, sir?
Some of the old ones like the Dynaflows and Slim Jims are really crazy, where they have 2 sets of couplers on the inside. But I think the one that would take the case, when I used to work at Thomas Dodge, it was also a Subaru dealer, and they sent me to transmission Subaru school. Oh my goodness, that all-wheel drive thing with the shafts and the nuts, and it was crazy. It wasn't an engineering nightmare. That's how I looked at it. It was an engineering feat. It was something that you didn't even think was possible when you seen how that transmission worked.
Oh, now have you done much work with like the Ford AXODs, the transverse AODs?
Man, AXODs, AXODEs. I paid off my first house doing those 125s, 440s, 604s, 606s, 125s, 200s, 204Rs. if there was a transmission out there, an American-made vehicle, I did it multiple times.
Want to holler at Blake? I see he slid in here.
How's
Yeah,
he doing? Is he feeling better?
he still sounded rough in his shopping cart video today. And if you haven't seen the if you have not seen Blake's shopping cart short, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. He has the question: can you fix a broken shopping cart with the tools they have at the big box store that owns the shopping cart? That's a wonderful question. Somebody needed to answer that, and Blake does. So watch that video if you get a chance. It's 1 minute, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Oh, Ed here is talking about the factory stall converter for Mopar was the 10 3/4 340 converter. What is the most stall any of those factory converters had?
Factory from the I think it was a Hemi at 2200.
Okay,
A 426 Hemi at 2200.
but see that also took the kind of torque that a Hemi made to realize that stall.
Right.
What other combinations could you use? Was there any kind of like if you took say a 273 torque converter and put it behind a big block, did you find any kind of weird combinations like that worked well? Or
I know you didn't like. I know from experience you didn't want to put big blocks behind small blocks and vice versa. If you put a big block converter behind a small block, it's not going to have no stall in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And if you put a small block converter behind a big block, it's going to be nothing but stall.
Okay.
So the torque curve is really, because I remember I had an 8-inch converter, a cone 8-inch, and I think my car was running like, I don't know, 1080s or 1090s at the time. And I put it behind a small block that was probably mid 11s. This thing didn't go 1250s. It was just a lame duck for like not 60 feet, but about 160 feet. It would not get out there. It was like you were leaving in high gear. It was really weird.
Oh, ooh. Cave
No.
Dave here. He said he was standing next to you at the burnout competition at the No Name Nationals and didn't realize he was standing next to greatness. Well, Cave Dave, I got to meet Cave Dave before the No Name Nationals. We were both at a funeral for a mutual friend, and he walked up to me and he recognized me because you see me on YouTube weekly, but I don't get to see a lot of these guys, so I don't know what some of them look like. But that was neat. I got to meet Cave Dave. So always glad to get to meet some of you guys in person. Which that's actually what the No Name Nationals was all about, because I could never live long enough to meet all of these guys in person. So I'm like, okay, we got to get everybody in one spot, and this is how we're going to do it, and it worked. So,
I think for next year, even if it does not grow by one car, I think of all us getting together now that we know each other more, and it's not there's no that uncomfortable all first time meeting you. I know what's going to happen. We're going to get together. I can just see us all around one big campfire. We all bring food and just grub together on one of the nights.
We're going to have a great. Oh, you know what? I won't give anything away, but not only is that a good idea. We got stuff in the works. Wild Rose says, what are both John's thoughts on transmission fluid? I run Type F Ford in all my stuff. And by the way, Nolan doesn't. I think he has a Ford truck, but he runs Type F in his TH350s and whatnot. What are your thoughts on transmission fluid, sir?
I run fluid that's red.
Okay.
Listen, I go through this weekly at the shop.
All right.
The guy calls me up and says, John, I bought my parts from you. What should I run in there? And I'll say, run a Dextron base fluid. Then he'll argue with me for a half hour about how great Type F is. And I'm like, well, why did you call me?
Right.
You want to use Type F? I don't care. Then the next guy would call. He goes, John, what should I use in my transmission? I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. Use Type F. And the guy goes, Well, you know what? Chrysler used Dextron 2 in those for all those years, and he wants to talk about it for a half hour. So every time someone calls me and asks me what fluid to use, all I say is red.
Yeah. That's a good answer. That's a really good answer.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't matter. But I know where this is going, and I've said this on this live before. In the 60s, when converter technology was terrible and there was really no one out there making, you know, uh, reverse manual valve bodies like they are today, you can take a torque flight or you can take a turbo 350 or 400 that came from the factory with Dextron 2.
Yep.
Drain it all out and put type F in there, and they will all shift a little bit firmer just by changing the fluid, because type F is thinner, and when it's hot, it goes through the passages quicker. So that's where that stems from.
Well, okay. What this reminds me of is, since he asked us both again, my comments, don't carry nearly the resume that Mr. Copes do. But for whatever it's worth, this reminds me of this old analogy. There was a family at the Thanksgiving dinner table, and they have a pan and they have a roast, and the end is cut off the roast for no discernible reason. And the little girl asks her mom, "Mom, why is the end cut off the roast?" And her mom says, "I don't know. That's how I always made it." So she asks her mom, the grandma, "Hey, grandma, why is the end cut off the roast?" And she says, "Well, I don't know. That's how your mom taught me to make the roast." And then so she goes over to great grandma and says, "Great grandma, why is the end cut off the roast?" She said, "You always taught us to do that. I never knew why." She said, "Well, that's because back when I first started cooking, I had a smaller roasting pan. So there's no reason to cut the end off the roast now, but they
Right.
did it then because the roasting pan was smaller." So it's exactly what you're saying. People use type F fluid then to get a different result with what they had then. But today, you can run 11 clutches in a 904, right? And you can get a ton of apply area. You have higher pressure valve bodies. You could more finely tune the application of the servos and stuff. So I don't know that there's as much need to play with the fluid now as there was then. I know that a guy that taught me a lot about building the first performance automatic I ever built, Kevin Justice, he said that he's actually tried to do some experiments with fluid, like testing, the temperatures at which they'll boil and what the fluid does when subjected to extreme heat and different stuff. He's actually tried to do some lab stuff with it. And his opinion was, for whatever it's worth, he liked Dextron better. He said he thought it was better fluid, but he thought that the fluid was better. Like Dextron 2, he thought was better than 3. And at that time, 4 was starting to come out. And he says he thought that the additive packages were hurting the quality of the fluid when you subjected it to a lot of heat.
I would agree with that scenario, John.
Yeah, that was what he told me. So he said when he had a chance, and this was like 2001, he said when he had a chance to buy all of the Dextron 2 he bought a bunch because he said he thought it was better fluid. And so that's just, for whatever that's worth, that's something I was told from a guy who had a good resume himself.
Yep.
Now, have I tested that? No, I have not. Now, I have always run Dextron in my Chrysler stuff. I've never tried anything else, so I'm totally unqualified to say what I think Type F does in a Chrysler. I've never used it. And if you're wondering how Blake's doing, he says not really feeling any better, but I hope we're at least entertaining him while he recovers.
At first
Danny,
I thought he caught the COVID. I'm glad he didn't have that, because that
Danny
seems
Boy
like it's going around.
Danny Boy just wants to know what happened to the end of the roast. I don't know. Couldn't tell you. I learned that lesson from James Yeager, firearms instructor, esteemed firearms instructor. And the reason he told us that is understand why people did the things they've done. So when people are doing something because whoever they is, because they've always done it, know why that person always did it. And so I would say that's the same thing with a lot of these things we do with transmissions. Yeah, and then this is the one I hear a lot, and I don't necessarily know what it means. Yeah, even the direct connection book said to use type if because it had a quote better friction coefficient. But I
Yeah.
never knew what better meant. But I think that Mr. Cope has articulated a better definition. It's less viscous, and so it flows through the passages quicker.
This coming from the same people that put turbo 400s in drag packs.
Fair enough.
Or the drag pack Viper became with the Power Glide.
This is a question that two people have asked. I'll pop it up. Please define stall.
Ugh. It's the point of when the engine RPM could go up without moving the car.
Right.
So if you got, let's say, a 3500 stall, you could probably foot brake it to 3 without moving the car through the brakes. Compared to stock, a converter can be like 1800. If your stock, let's say you have a Dodge minivan and you put it in gear, you notice that the engine doesn't die when you put it in gear. If you did the same thing in a clutch and pop the clutch, it would die. Because when you're in your minivan and you put it in gear, the converter is stalling. Otherwise, the engine would die. So in performance, you want to bring the stall up to the peak of the power, not the peak, but where it really starts to make there's a lot of power, 3 grand, 4 grand, or whatever.
So in an ideal world, you would know what your dyno numbers are before you selected a torque converter.
Right, or at least your cam specs. That's why you can't get a converter for me without filling out the spec sheet.
Wild Rose Garage says, I've heard of running tractor fluid. Some say it's great. So Nolan, if it's red, it's probably fine, right?
It's not red.
Then there you go.
It's clear, and I know a lot of guys running John Deere fluid. I'm not a fan of it myself, but a lot of the fast guys do it, and it's very popular. Actually, it's very popular.
It's a big thing in the radial drag racing circles.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's a no prep thing to run that John Deere tractor fluid.
Dakota has a thoughtful question here. He says, does stall speed have much effect on a regular driver, like, say, a car with too big of a cam?
Does it have an effect on a regular driver if you have too big of a cam? It can. If your stall is too high, it can always feel like the engine's revving quite high all the time.
That's a really good question too for Andy Wood. There's a guy who runs a massive cam with a ton of stall in a street vehicle. He's a guy who likes to push the limits on that.
Handy's got a lockup converter, so
right.
I got 488 gears and a 4500 stall, and I can put it at 55 miles an hour, turn the lockup on, and chug around like a little old lady.
That is the sweetest setup. That truck's got 488 gears, and you go 1, 2, 3, then 4, then push a button, and it drops again. Yep. Really nice.
The button is for lockup in the clutch.
Yes. Well, but the nice thing was that again, you can't realize this for math, but that little bit of RPM difference when you locked up the converter, the noise drops off to a point that truck isn't too loud to cruise.
Yes.
It really cuts down on the resonance in the cab.
And if I'm going like 35 miles an hour and I see a cop coming, I'll put it in overdrive and I'll turn the lockup on. You barely even hear that it's running.
Yeah. It was cool. This is really interesting. Beckerwood Custom says he runs a 4,500 RPM converter in a street car. It drives all right.
Yep.
Yeah, Andy said I got spoiled driving Haney. Man, that thing is sweet. That is really nice. Okay, we went from Russell J. Finch back to J. Russell Finch, who says, this has to be to me. Drive like a little old lady. Yes, I do. Dallas gives me a hard time about it because Dallas will drive a route and it takes 5 hours and it takes me like 6.5. Because I'll just be poking along 60 miles an hour and I'll stop stretch my legs. Dallas is just like hammer down, the whole way there. Yes, I do drive like a little old lady. Danny Boyd likes to push in the clutch when passing a cop in a loud car. Yeah, just don't
Oh
put
yeah,
the pedal down going down a hill.
that'll work really good.
Yep. Dakota wants to know if you have any experience with gear vendors.
Oh yeah, I'm a gear vendor dealer.
There you go.
Yep. I actually got a really good video on my playlist where I compare a 48 RE with a lock converter versus a gear vendors. As far as what you spend and what RPMs you can get on a drop and all that, it's a really good video. But gear vendors are great. They're $3,000 now,
Yeah.
and you only get a 22% RPM drop, where the 46 RE gives you a 28 RPM or a 28% drop.
I was going to say that when you have the opportunity to run the 46.7.8 RE transmissions, there's not a good reason I can think to do a gear vendors and something where
Yep.
you can do that. Andy saying you have a good gear vendors video on your channel. So
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Much respect.
Big Belly Racing wants to know is, can you mix Type F and Dextron?
Yeah.
We're getting into the decadent phase of the transmission fluid questions here, but that's okay. Yeah.
Look at it this way, Billy. If you're stuck in the middle of nowhere and the only way you can get where you need to go is by mixing the two fluids, guess what? I'd be mixing those two fluids. I wouldn't think twice about it.
What? Jay Russell Finch says, not me. Coat drives like a little old lady. Coat does not drive like a little old lady. I've ridden with Coat, okay? Coat makes the trees flex when he passes. Andy likes that you can split gears with the gear vendors. Yeah, it is pretty cool. But I mean, I like to have the fewest gears possible to get the result I want, unless I'm trying to stay in some crazy narrow power band. The other thing about the gear vendors, and this would be a good question for you, is how much parasitic loss do they have? How much power does it take to turn them?
I've tried splitting those gears before. So you put it in first gear, turn on the overdrive, then you shift into second and shut off the overdrive at the same time. Your timing's got to be very good as a driver to get none of that to overlap with each other.
Yeah.
I've always told my customers, because they sell that as a 6-speed, you put a torque or you put a gear vendors behind a 4-speed, you can shift it 5 times and have 6 speeds. I always said that was a gimmick. You can split them and do that. You got first. Where's my finger? First overdrive. Second overdrive. Third overdrive. That's 6 gears if you split it. But you're just turning overdrive on every gear. So you take 3, multiply it by 2, you have 6.
Yeah, but see, the ratio drop on the gear vendors isn't enough that you could go through 3 ratios and then switch it on, then go 3 more. And it would be totally impractical to operate a shifter that way.
Yeah, I think it would be too.
Yeah, I can't see running it like that. I think what it would be cool, though, is if you had a really narrow power band, or let's say that you had something that didn't have a lot of torque and your ratios were wide in the transmission, and you want that one ratio that's just right for climbing that mild hill or with a trailer. Yeah, that's fine. But to me, you'd be better served by getting an overdrive transmission. And the gear vendors, in my opinion, is better if you have something like something you can't get an overdrive for, or like, let's say that you're running an MP435 4-speed, something like that. I think they'd be ideal for that. Like for example, one thing I think I'd always like to have, and maybe one of these days I will be an old ramp truck, right? So with that, if you had, say, a 4-speed, like the new Process 435, which has got the real wide ratios, that might be ideal, because then you could have an overdrive that would work better for the highway. And since the thing's got 10 feet of drive shaft on it, you have a perfect place to put it too. So that's just my thought. I don't know if that's reasonable, but let's see. Wild Rose is saying, I worked with a kid that had a 1985 Ford 6.9 diesel with a C6 and a gear vendors. When pulling, he used to split all gears when pulling heavy. He said it helped a lot. Good for him. Yeah, Dust Devil wants a ramp truck so bad. I think they're so cool. Man, there's one of them. It was everything I could do not to call about, because I knew if I called about it and it was still available, I was going to wind up with it. It was a 79 Dodge 350 ramp truck.
The white one that's been on the internet?
No, this is a different one. There's actually a couple. I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them that have been on that, whatever that site is, that never gets rid of anything, that 2040, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't even pay attention to that site, because stuff on there stays on it forever. I mean, you could have something that sold in 2005 on that site. This was another one. This one was in Texas. Yeah, Levi sells a ramp truck. Ed's dropping off. He's got a caller tonight. That's cool. Yeah, we got a few minutes left here. We got 9 minutes left. So if any of you guys have any questions for Cope, anything.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
How's Casper coming along? Do you know, John, or could Andy fill us in?
The last update I saw from Andy is it looked like he was getting ready to get it back really soon. Looks like the headers are done. So anything beyond that, you'll have to ask Andy, because that was the last.
I saw a picture of it that he posted on his community page, and it looked absolutely beautiful.
Yep. Yeah, Dust Devil's saying it's hard to find old ramp trucks, most are Chevy. I think it'd be cool to have an old ramp truck.
It'd be cool to have one of those old funny car haulers that they use to haul funny cars.
Yeah. So check this out. Dragpack Mercs saying his buddy Lauren spent 15 years tracking down and restoring his dad's 428 Super Cobra Jet Cougar Eliminator. He's unveiling it tomorrow at 11 Central on his YouTube channel, The Auto Collection. So there you go. If you want to see a lost and found car,
very cool.
This gets unveiled tomorrow at 11 Central on The Auto Collection.
Very cool.
Cool. Yeah. I love it when people find cars that have been missing like that. I've done it once, and I think it's really cool.
You see Finch's.
All right, Jay Russell Finch is asking, Haney versus Casper, who wins?
I don't know. Next year, Haney's going to have a big cam and a big nitrous kit on it. So
ooh.
I don't know.
Oh, I'm telling you, everybody is bringing more next year. Everybody I talk to is saying, "Oh, I'm doing this and that." And everybody's bringing more. All right, Dust Devils. Go ahead.
Nothing. Go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to say, Dust Devil has a question. If he can't swing the money for a billet drum, is it still better to get the low band apply and a drag sprag?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The next best thing.
The billet, the low band apply and the drag sprag is the bulletproof vest. The billet drum is not getting shot in the first place. Okay, so there's a cause and effect. You would rather it not blow up at all. Okay, so the low band apply and the drag sprag will help it to not blow up in the first place. Danny Boyd says that his mom's 68 Mustang is still out there, according to the Ohio BMV title search.
Very cool.
That's cool. I used title records to help me confirm my aunt's van. So that's cool. But, I know so for those who don't know, when Cope has his truck Haney, that's actually Haney 2. And let's see here if I can. I know I've got a picture of Haney 1. This is Haney 1. This is what inspired Mr. Haney.
That's it.
This is the Haney work truck. And there's a good article, too. And I don't know if you want to put this on your community page. Cope's dad, Jack Cope, actually did some snow rescue and got a newspaper article written about him doing snow rescue. Thought that was pretty cool.
I remember it like yesterday, John. The old man went out and took his tow truck and he towed everybody out of the snow during the blizzard in Chicago. And he didn't charge not one person anything. No money, no nothing. Somehow or another, the newspaper got a hold of it. They put an article in there about his truck, about his transmission business. And there was a line of people coming in Dad's shop to get their transmission done.
Because they knew what kind of person he was.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
will you post that article on your community page?
Sure.
I thought it was great. I read it. So if you guys want to see it, go over to the community page, Cope Racing Transmissions. It'll be there. I'll make sure to share it if I see it come up.
Actually, I was going to do a video real quick. I was going to go back to Dad's original shop and talk about the first Haney, how he taught me to drive it, what he did with his business, and do like a little history thing of where my beginnings come from. And I was going to tell that story.
Yes.
But no, I'd be more than happy to post that.
Now, also, speaking of, so the black Power Wagon that's being built in the shop right now, that is also basically a tribute truck to the old shop truck.
Yep.
So sometimes, finding the original is cool, but if the original can't be found or isn't out there, or maybe for whatever reason you don't use the original, a tribute vehicle is still really cool too. But speaking of that, and this is just completely off topic of the chat, it does say later, Travis Bell does say later that he got a lot of flack for rebodying the General. He admits it. It's explicitly in there. No ambiguity.
I know he was accused of that, John.
He did do it. He admits it.
Well, could we classify what you consider a rebody?
Okay. A rebody means he took another charger, another body, another VIN, and he used the floor and the firewalls and the rocker and the A pillars and the B pillars and the frame rails and used another car and used a lot of parts from Lee 1 and put it together and made a vehicle with another car. So Lee 1 is no more, and another car that's had a VIN tag put on it is now being called.
Now, swapping VINs is one thing. If you took that VIN off of Lee 1 and put it on a charger, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah,
I don't think that's what's happened.
That is what happened. He admitted it.
I don't think so. I think what I think happened is if you look at the video, you'll see a picture when Travis has that car, which is a shell. It is the roof trusses.
I know what you're talking about.
And then he bought another charger and stripped the parts off of that to put it on Lee 1.
No, what happened was he took that shell and they had that shell media blasted. Because you can look at the photos. Yes, they media blasted the original shell on the rotisserie. I think the intention was using that shell. But then when they saw how bad it was, they didn't use that shell. They were this close to using the original shell, and then they didn't.
You know what, though? Here's the deal about that, though, John.
They use this. This is the car that is now being called General Lee number 1. Now this.
I think, and I could be wrong, that picture is Lee 1 with different body panels on it.
It's not, because they actually showed it. Check it out. I got a stink bug walking over my camera. How cool is that? Look at that. Where'd you come from?
Yeah.
All right, move. I need my camera. Now, if you look, these have not been primed and worked, and the original panels were nowhere near this straight. They would have had to have painted and worked them over. The timeline doesn't corroborate.
Everybody knows, John, that swapping VINs is frowned upon by even a Chevelle guy would be frowned upon that, right?
Yeah.
Well, why would you brag about it? If anything, the guy would try and hide that, not brag about it.
I think what he did was, and I mean, all of the evidence points to, he has swapped the VINs. He's used a whole lot of parts from the other one. Okay, he did use Lee One's engine. He did use Lee One's transmission. He said nothing about the rear axle, but he used the body, the floor, the rockers, the A pillars, the B pillars, the shell. He used the shell from another Charger. He assembled the other parts on it, even including a cracked windshield, to make it as authentic a replica as he could. But anyway, I'm just betting that he made every effort to completely and thoroughly destroy Lee One's original carcass so that nobody else would find it and find a VIN on it. Because that would forever put an asterisk on that one.
There's only one way to find out. Let's get Travis on the show.
Well, yeah, he won't want to come on my show probably, but
why not?
Because he won't like what I have to say. He just seems like the kind of guy that doesn't want to hear it.
Well, maybe he can educate you, tell you that you were wrong. I don't know.
If I'm wrong, I'm all for it. Fine by me. Fine by me.
I don't know, John. I wasn't there. I don't know how much of the body parts for that car of Lee One is on what they're calling Lee One now. You know, I mean, if you had Lee One, let's say Lee One was a driving car when he found it, and you accidentally smashed the whole front end, and you had to cut it off and put a new front end on it, is it still the Lee One?
I say that you.
I mean, what percentage of the car this has to be original?
You have to have the unibody that holds it all together. That's what you must have, in my opinion.
Which they show in that video.
That they do, but they showed it where they blasted the old one and then made a game time decision that it was too far gone. I'll tell you what, guys. You in the comments, check it out. You know what I'll do? I'm going to put a link under this live. And you guys can all check it out. You know what I'll do? I'll do it as a community post. I'll do it as a community post, and I'll share the video. And then you guys in the comments can watch it and tell us what you think. So Travis Bell is the guy who found General Lee #1 in a junkyard in Georgia. Okay. And then he finds it. And then, in my opinion, when this guy came to him and wanted to restore it, he found the body shop, started writing checks and all of that, and it looked like they did a really, really good job with the resto, but they did not use the original shell. So I'll put up the video. You guys, let's discuss it in the comments section. And if we have enough interest, we'll have another live roundtable. And if Mr. Bell wants to come in here, I'm all for it. And I am 100% okay with being wrong, and I hope I am, because I hope the car still exists.
I have a question, John.
Yeah.
If someone can verify through Travis or whoever that they use the shell, which is the windowing, the cowl, or as much as the shell.
It has to have the unibody, including like floor, trans tunnel, A, B pillars, the structure.
Right. If that is all original Lee One,
yep,
and you put fenders, roof, quarters, doors, floors, trunk, is it still considered Lee One to you?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think the shell, I think
this could be good info.
But I think the unibody is not.
Well, I don't know. I think it looks like it is, but I'll be the first one to bet you.
You know what? I'm gonna take that action, and we're gonna make a community post. And if you guys can stir up enough hate, discontent, and interest and good-natured stuff about it, maybe Mr. Bell will want to come on the show. But I don't think he will. I think he'll say, "There's no way in the world I want to go."
I think I've never met Travis, but I absolutely love his videos. He has a great way of telling a story.
He does. That he does.
He also remade the Transmedivac van from Cannonball Run.
Yeah, he's talented. He's intelligent. He's a good storyteller. I love the way he found the General Lee.
His first car that he did was a '74 Monaco Bluesmobile, and he drove it from Indianapolis to Chicago, and he drove it through the Dixie Mall before they tore it down. You got to see that video.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, is that great? So We might be able to get Travis on. I think if I make a few phone calls, I
Yeah.
might be able to get in contact with him.
We can, you know what? We can certainly engage this and try it. I'm
And let
skeptical, but
Travis
I'm open minded.
tell us what he did with
Of
the
course.
car, and
You
we'll
bet.
see what he'll know more than anybody, right?
Sure. Well, now understand. There's some people who granted will know more than anybody, but that's a difference between somebody who will tell more than anybody.
Okay,
So
all
you do
right.
realize that, right? Some people will
Well,
play poker for their best interests. So
I
uh,
I I take Travis to be, from only what I can tell by watching his videos, to be an honest
I
person.
think so too. I
I
think so.
don't. I think he's going to tell you good or bad.
Yeah, I think
And
I agree with that. I
you
agree with that,
know,
and I think it would be a good guest with a lot of interest to have him on. And uh, we, of course, we run a respectful show here, and everybody knows that. So, yeah, I would certainly he's certainly welcome to come on here. But I'll make a community post. I'll put the video up. All of you guys who are in here, watch it, watch it, and comment. It's not a long video, and I promise you, it's interesting. You'll start
you'll love it.
watching it, and you're like, man, this is interesting. This is cool stuff. You won't put it down. You won't stop watching.
Well,
Watch the
I bet
story.
you 90% of the guys already seen the video.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
without giving them any bias, watch
All
the
right.
video, come to your own conclusion, and then if we can do a follow up with Bill, maybe that'll happen. But with tonight has flown by, we're already past our time, and I gotta say, it always flies by when we have Cope on the show every time. So, uh, I want to thank all of you guys for coming out and watching. I want to thank the mods for keeping the peace, even though I didn't see a single problem tonight. So good on that. Uh, I want to thank Cope for being on. I appreciate it. I
Thank you
just
for
shot him a
having
message
me.
this afternoon and said, "Hey, we're talking about the education of automotive performance." And since you did that, that was my hook. That's my excuse because I always like hanging out with Cope, but that's my excuse. I got to have an excuse to want to tie up his Friday, right? But anyway, thanks for being on, and look for that community post, and we will re-engage this topic later.
Mopar to you.
Thanks, guys.